So today we're going to be making a 5" by 5" by 5" cube out of poster board. The materials that we're going to need to be using today include an X-Acto knife, we need a pencil of any kind, we need a ruler that is long enough for us to measure on the poster board. 24 inches or 36 is advisable. It all depends on the size of the poster board you're using. And we have our painter's tape, which is a specific type of tape that is easy to remove from surfaces so it doesn't tear away. What we need to do when we go to make any kind of form or object, of course, is first to draft out our dimensions, to figure out exactly what kind of cuts we need to make. So we've gone ahead and done those measurements and that work here. So as it says in the very top corner, this is not to scale, which means that the drawing on the page might look a little different than what we actually have in terms of dimensions. So we have a cube that is here. You'll notice it'll say 5 with 2 little slash marks, 5 with 2 little slash marks, 5 with 2 little slash marks, and that's an indication of the dimensions of those sides. A double slash mark means inches. One little slash mark is a foot, and that's standard nomenclature for any time that you're measuring anything or getting dimensions in the American standard system. So what I've noted here in my drawing is to go ahead and make sure that we understand that poster board has a dimension. Every material has a dimension to it. So when you're trying to craft something and you want it to be exactly the size of what you're drafting, you need to account for that extra amount of material. So that's why we have these little shaded in areas to help us understand that a cube, if we want it to be exactly 5 inches by 5 inches, has to accommodate the thickness of the poster board. And that's where we're gonna have to start using a little math and some fractions. So we all know that 5 inches is the same exact thing as saying 4 and 16 over 16. Because if we take 16 over 16, that means 1, so 4 plus 1 is the same as saying 5. So I'm looking at my box here and I'm thinking about the distance here between this part here to this part right here. And I see that how I've designed this is so that there's a poster board piece on the top and the bottom, and those are 5 inches by 5 inches. In order for the distance from here to here to be 5 inches, I'm gonna have to deduct this width, this dimension of the poster board. So we're gonna say 4 and 16/16 minus 3/16 here, minus 3/16 here, because our poster board is 3/16 of an inch thick. So we're gonna always have to just remember 3/16 of an inch thick as we work out these problems. So 4 and 16/16 minus 3/16 minus 3/16, that's 4 and 16/16 minus 6 over 16, and that would come out to 4 and 10 over 16. And 4 and 10 over 16, as we know, is the same thing as saying 4 and 5/8, because we can divide the 10 and the 16 by 2, which gives us a 5 over an 8. Now, on our other surface area from here to here, the side wall from edge to edge, we're going to build this so that there's overlapping pieces. And what that means is that this piece will go all the way over to that edge, this piece will go all the way over to that edge, and there'll be an overlap of only one side per corner. So now I need to say, what is 5 inches minus 3/16? So I'll write that out as 5 inches, which is the same as 4 and 16/16. And then 4 and 16/16 minus 3/16. And that'll come out to 4 and 13/16. Now you can't divide that down. 13 and 16 do not have a common denominator. So in the end, we've figured out that board right there needs to be 4 and 5/8, which is your up to down, by, that's what this little cross mark means, is by 4 and 13/16. And we know that we have a cube, right? So we're going to go ahead and write down our cut sheet. And here's our cut sheet. A cut sheet means literally what is it that we're going to have to cut today. So right here is QT, which means quantity. And I'm saying that I need 2 pieces that are 5 by 5 inches. That's my top and my bottom piece. And then the side walls, I need, it's a cube, so we have to have a total of 6 sides. We need 4 pieces that are 4 and 5/8, which is our dimension here, by 4 and 13/16, which is, as we just discussed, our dimension across here. All right, so we need to take a look at our ruler and understand specifically how rulers work, what those little lines on the ruler all mean and whatnot. So when you look at your ruler, when you take a really close look, you're going to see that between every single inch, there's a whole bunch of little tiny lines, right? And let's go ahead and count one time how many lines they're putting in on this side of the ruler. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. All right. They've taken the inch and they've broken it down into 16 little marks. And if you look at your ruler closely, you'll see that the different marks have different lengths of slashes. So the inch mark is the longest line on the ruler. And then dead in the middle is a line that is the second longest on the ruler, and that's halfway. And then you'll notice there's other lines that are slightly smaller than the half. Those are your 1/4 of an inches. And then after that, the other lines that are slightly smaller are 1/8 of an inch. And then the tiniest lines are the 16ths of an inch. So what they've done is they've made it so that you can kind of quickly reference on the ruler what is a 1/2 inch, what's a 1/4 of an inch, what's 1/8 of an inch. But in any case, no matter what, you can always just count them and figure out what it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 to the edge. All right. Many rulers, if you flip them around, you'll see that the other side doesn't have as many little lines. They just make it so it's a little bit more roughed out, larger dimensions, which they're just a little visually easier to see. Some people will have rulers, though, that they're made more for even more precise modeling or measurements, and instead of 16, they might have 32 different little slashes or 64 different slashes. And in any case, though, the inch is always the same. It's just how they're parsing it out on your ruler. So make sure that you've taken a good look at your ruler and you understand that part of how dimensions are measured out on a ruler. So I have my poster board here, and like I said before, we know that it's 3/16 of an inch. I've gone ahead and laid my ruler up against the very edge, and I looked at how many tiny little slashes there are, and we know that there's 3/16 is how thick that the poster board is. So let's go ahead and start making our cuts and our measurements. I'm going to start off by making the easier cuts. 5 inches by 5 inches is kind of a simple measurement, simple to understand. So I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler, and it's good to note that some rulers do not have, they have a little extra edge on the end. Some rulers start right from the edge, and then some rulers start slightly over. You got to make sure you pay attention and see where your ruler actually starts. This one starts at the edge, but many of them have a little extra space, and then they draw a line in and it starts from there. So I'm going to take my ruler, and what's really important here is I'm taking my ruler and I'm lining it up perfectly at the edge and parallel to the outside. All right. If your ruler walks and it's, you know, not parallel to an edge, then the measurement that you're taking is going to be slightly off. All right. You have to make sure that the ruler is right at the edge along the material that you're measuring and going to cut. So here I am, and I need to go 5 inches over. Here's my 5-inch mark. The lines on the inches on both sides of the ruler are the same. So a 5-inch mark here is actually on the other side, the 19, because they've just flipped the ruler around and measured, you know, walked the numbers out a different way. So I'm going to start off by measuring here and putting my 5-inch mark in, and I do that by putting my pencil down exactly where that mark needs to be, and I slash one way, and then I'm going to slash the other way to make an arrow. And the arrow says this is the exact spot. All right. It is very, very inaccurate to take you know, if you wanted to create a line, it's very inaccurate to just pick a spot and then do this like thing where people scribble. That's not an accurate way of understanding exactly where a spot might be. So avoid that at all costs. So now I'm going to go to the other side of my poster board. I'm going to lay my ruler up against the edges, perfectly parallel to the edge and right at the edge. And here I have my 5-inch mark, and I'm going to go ahead and just make another arrow right there. Once I have those 2 arrows in, I could go ahead and lay my ruler down. And you got to note very carefully as you move your pencil across the ruler, you want to make sure that it's going right through the middle of those arrows. It's very easy to take your pencil and you could, you know, go like this, and as you make a mark, you're way, way off from where the ruler is. So you want to pay attention to where the actual pencil lead point is meeting the poster board or the material that you're trying to cut. All right, so 5 inches here. The next thing I need to do is just go ahead and I'm going to put my ruler down back on that line. And I'm going to measure 5 inches. And then another 5 inches would be here at the 10-inch mark. So I'm just going to go ahead and make my arrow there at the 10-inch mark. And now I'll go over to the other side. And I will make another 5-inch mark and another 10-inch mark. From there, take my ruler, line it up directly across those little arrows. And again, trying to make sure that I go right through the center of the arrows when I'm making my mark with my pencil. Alrighty, whoop, move it over a little bit. And now I've got my 2 5-inch boxes. And you know, there's a phrase that always goes, you know, measure twice, cut once. And it's a very, very famous phrase and very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and lay my ruler down a couple of times and just make sure that that's actually 5 inches by 5 inches. So let's go ahead and we'll cut those 5-inch pieces out. I have my X-Acto blade. The really key important thing about using your X-Acto knife, well, there's 2 things. There's a safety issue, and then there's just how well it works. The blade itself needs to be really sharp. If you've got a dull X-Acto blade, it makes cutting things cleanly and crisply very difficult. So you want to make sure that that's sharp. And of course, if you just pulled it out of the box or out of the packaging and stuck it in, you know it's going to be sharp. But perhaps you've used it many times and you need to check it. You can check the sharpness of the blade by taking your finger, and what you do is not this way, because that's how you cut things, but you rub your finger sideways across the blade, like so, all right? And you'll be able to kind of feel how prickly or not prickly it is. You know, this is common with kitchen knives or with, you know, the razor you might use in the bathroom. You know, when you check to see if it's sharp, you rub your finger this way, and you can kind of just feel it. It takes some experience and practice, but you can kind of tell whether or not it's sharp. Please don't rub it this way. You're just going to slice your finger. And let's go ahead and talk about that safety issue, which is whenever you're making cuts with a sharp object like a utility knife, you know, this is an X-Acto knife, but any kind of blade, any kind of sharp object, what you want to make sure you never do is, I never want to take the blade and cut towards your hand. You always want to make sure that you have positioned yourself so that you're taking the knife and cutting away from your hand, all right? Key thing. Many people get injured all the time because they hold something here and they pull, and then all of a sudden it gets away from them. They pull hard, and then all of a sudden they slash themselves. So please, you know, most important thing, it's simple too, just make sure that you're never pulling the blade towards your hand or your body per se. So I'm gonna go ahead and make this, what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and make a cut all the way along this 5-inch line. I'll stop right at the corner, and then I'll make my other 2 cuts. And I could make a slash all the way across the board, but you really want to kind of always remember to save as much material as possible. So while it wouldn't be a you know, big deal, end of the world issue, if I cut all the way across, then this piece right here would be no longer usable in case maybe I wanted to make a longer cut on the board another direction or whatnot. So let's go ahead and make those cuts. And so I'm just going to make sure that I'm comfortable with how I am placing my hands and how I'm going to do this. The best way to cut is to first insert and then make sure that the blade is at an angle. You don't want to go straight, you don't want to go straight up and down. You want to go at an angle as you're cutting. So let's go ahead and do that. I've made my first insertion point. My hand is off up to the left and away from the blade. And now I'm gonna just pull the blade at about a 30-45 degree angle to the material. And you'll see I'm not going very fast, but I am pushing firmly. And what I'm trying to make sure that I do is I'm keeping that blade perpendicular to the material. So in other words, to get a nice even cut, I want to make sure that the knife is perpendicular to the material. If it's leaning one way or the other, then the cut that I'm going to get is going to be angled, and that'll change the width and dimension of the material. Sometimes your first cut will go all the way through, but often you're going to need to go back and give one more slice to your cut. Don't cut, you know, don't use an X-Acto knife on top of a surface that you don't have protected. So here I've got a cutting mat. If you don't have a cutting mat to use, you can use cardboard, also like a stack of newspaper print, magazines, anything that'll protect the surface that you're cutting on. You don't want to slice up, you know, your mom's nice dining room table making your project. She'll not be happy about that. All right, so I've got that cut made. And again, I'm going to dip my blade in first, angle it down a little bit, and then pull and try to keep the blade as straight up and down as possible. I'll make a few more slices just to make sure I've gone through the material. Here we have one. And there we have the next one. Sometimes there'll be a little sticky spot in the corner, like a little piece of paper hanging on. Just don't rush it. Go in, just, you know, tap it with your knife and you'll get your pieces clean. So we did a pretty good job here. And you can tell whether or not you did a good job on your cuts by looking at the edges of the board. It'll also tell you how sharp or not sharp your knife is. If your knife is nice and sharp, then you're gonna have these clean, crisp edges, right? If your knife is not sharp, and mine is good, so it's a little hard to see, but you know, there's an edge there that has a little ruffling, right? And that would be an area, like if I had that all the way down the edge, I would know that my knife is not sharp or something that I'm doing is a little bit off. So I have my two 5" by 5" pieces, and now what I need is 4 pieces that are 4 5/8. 4 5/8 by 4 13/16. So in order to get those pieces, I'm going to take a little measurement across my board and see if I've got enough material here to make one long clean cut. And it seems that I do, because I've got 20 inches. I'm going to start making my measurements. So, you know, here's a part that can be a little bit, well, confounding, because you might have to do a little math, or you have to, you know, move your ruler around a lot. I'm going to go with the shorter distance here of the 4 5/8 first. So 4, and I know that that's 1/8. I know that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5/8. 5/8 is the same thing as 10/16. So if you're not measuring, if you can't figure out the lines correctly, just count the little tiny dot in the lines, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that tells me where that is, all right? So that's 4 5/8 right there. I need 3 more that are 4 5/8. So you can do this different ways. If you need to, what you can do is just move your ruler down and make sure it's exactly on that same spot where your arrow is. And then you can do a 4 5/8 measurement from there. And we can do another one. And this is going to be the easy go-to method. It's not quite as accurate as the other method I'm about to show you, but it is close. All right, so I got 4 5/8 here. Go back and check again. 4 5/8 there. 4 5/8 there. And I might just erase this other previous mark so I don't get myself confused later on. Alrighty. All right, so those are my marks here at the 4 5/8. I need to now go up and make my other mark, because as we know, in order to get straight lines, we have to have 2 marks and then score, right? So we'll go up here to the top. I'm actually gonna maybe flip that out, around. All right, so 4 5/8 is right here. And so the other way to do this is to go ahead and just figure out 4 5/8 plus 4 5/8 is equal to 8/10/8, which is the same thing as saying 9/2/8, which is the same thing as saying 9 1/4. So what I could do is just do that math and then come over and find 9 inches and 1/4 of an inch, right? And that's going to be the same thing. From here to here is going to be 4 5/8. All right. So you can do it, you know, either way. If you wanna be fancy and go ahead and do, you know, the math of it all, you know, just add them as you go. So 9 1/4 plus 4 5/8 is the same thing as saying 9 what's 1 over 2 eighths plus 4 and 5 eighths, which is going to equal 13 and 7 eighths. And so I could go over here to 13, 1/8, 1/4, 3/8, half, 5/8. There's this 7/8 right here. All right, it's a little bit more math to do it that way, but it is actually more accurate. So 13 and 7/8 now plus 4 and 5/8 is going to equal 17 and 12 over 8, which is the same thing as 18 and 4 over 8, which is the same thing as saying, 18 and a half, right? So we'll come over down here. Again, I'm just going to make sure my ruler is perfectly aligned to the edges. And we're going to go to 18 and a half. And again, I'm going to double check everything. All right, so let's make sure there's 4 and 5/8 between those. Let's make sure there's 4 and 5/8 between those arrows. Everything looks pretty good. All right, so now that I have those arrows marked out, I'm going to go ahead and make these lines. All right, easy breezy. Now the other, we got the 4 and 5/8. Now we still need the 4 and 13/16, but that's going to be much easier to do because for this part, what we can do is we're going to lay our tape measure down. We're going to lay our ruler, I should say, down, and we're going to walk over to 4 and 13/16. So, I really need to maybe count this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And again, I'm going to make a little arrow, right? So that I know exactly what the spot is. Move it over. Just flipping the ruler around to make it as easy as I want to in terms of measuring. 14, 13/16 is right there. And now I'm going to take those two marks. I'm going to line my ruler up very carefully on the middle of the arrows. All right, so let's double check like we talked about before. We always measure twice, cut once. Let's make sure that that is 4 and 5/8. 4 and 5/8. Good, 4 and 5/8 all the way down the line. Make sure everything else is exactly what we wanted so that we have the perfect measurements. And remember that your rulers are basically one side's the same as the other side. Everything, and the inches are always inches. So I don't really have to go from 0 to whatever. I could start at the number 10, right? Or the number 14. And from 14 over should be 4 and 3/16, which is going to just come down to the 9 and the 3/16. So, you can always kind of move your ruler around. Just remember that it's all just basically math and all the increments are the same. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and make my cuts. And start from right here. So start by just diving in, getting a little edge of that corner, and then I'll bring my blade down to a 30 or 45 degree angle. And that angle allows you to get a much straighter, cleaner cut. If you're straight up and down with your blade rather than sort of dragging it along, it's not gonna be as easy for you to get a clean cut. It tends to tear the material that you're using. So we'll go ahead and separate that one. So like we mentioned before, your very first cut normally often does not go all the way through the material. So you might have to slash through more than one time. And then we'll separate. Keeping my hand well away from the blade, not pulling it towards myself, all right? Like putting it here and pulling would be a really, really bad idea, so I'm gonna keep my hand to the outside. Like we spoke about, might have to slice through more than once sometimes. All right, and so my edges look pretty good. Like we were talking about before, part of the craft of this, the skill set that you have to find is that when you make those cuts, you want those edges to be kind of as 90-degree angled as possible. You don't want to have cuts that are have the edges at sharp angles, because that'll mess up the overall measurement. So I'm pretty good here. I'm just kind of looking over my pieces and seeing if they're all lined up together, which looks pretty nice. All right, so next step. So I've got my pieces, and I've got my 5" by 5" pieces, and then I've got my others. I'm gonna go ahead and set them down and just quickly rough out what they'll look like to make sure that my measurements came out the way that they are supposed to. And what I'm doing is I'm overlapping, all right? Whoops, gotta go this way, not that way. What I'm doing is I'm overlapping. So on this piece right here, I'm putting it edge to edge, just like that. And then I'm gonna take my other piece and slot it on the corner. And if we did things correctly, then it should come out so that it's corner to corner, all right? This might take you a little bit of experimentation to understand the angles and how the corners are working out. So just tool around with this a little bit and you'll be able to figure it out. So my final step here, I'll lay all these pieces out, which are my side walls. Here's my top and my bottom. I'm gonna take my tape and I'm just gonna go ahead and pull off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just little slices, that's all I need. I'm gonna take these pieces here. I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4 just halfway across the board. Set them down. With the side walls, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, those are my side walls. Okay, I'm going to take one of these pieces. I'm going to set it up on the edge. I'm going to take that piece of tape right there, and I'm just going to stick it onto the side wall. All right, so now I've got this piece exactly where it would go, with a piece of tape holding it right there. And I'm going to take my next piece, I'm going to lay it down where it should go. I'm going to go from corner to corner. Alrighty, and once I got it in the right position, I'm going to take that piece of tape that's on the side wall, and I'm just going to go like that. And I'm going to take a piece from the bottom and go like that. Alright, so now you can see I've got 2 of my walls up and operating. So now I'm just going to go ahead and throw in all the other pieces. Go like this. Here to here. So the tape is kind of acting like hinges at this point. It's just kind of holding everything together, but you know, in a way so that if when we need to, we can unfold everything. And then I put my 5-inch piece on top and check and see if everything came out correctly, which looks pretty good. All right. So very last step is, well, deciding what we're going to use this for. Perhaps this is going to be an open container and you want to lift the lid off, and you can even create like a little, a little lip around the inside if you want to, so it kind of slotted on. You could make a handle that sticks on it if you want to, or maybe this is a pedestal. Maybe you really just need a 5-inch cube to put your phone on top of while you're working, or as a ledge for a light bulb. Who knows what it might be. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take that off of here, and I'm now going to unhinge it. Let me grab, I've got regular Elmer's glue here, just white glue, easy enough to use. Some people use, like hot glue. I don't really like to use hot glue. I find it to be very, very messy. But in any case, so what I'm doing now is I'm just going to take off the side tape. Just moving that around so you guys can see what we're doing here. All right, so I'm taking off the side tape, and you can see because I've got the tape that we started on the bottom, it's like a hinge, so everything's still where it needs to be. All right, so now I'll go ahead and just lay down my glue. All right, and then each wall has to adhere to the next wall, so you can just do it in such a way, as long as you do it you got to make sure you get the right edge, but you only really have to do one edge on each one of those. So once you figure it out, just make sure you're doing the same edge on each. And now we're just gonna take it and hinge it all back up together again. All right, so I'm gonna take this piece like this and like that, making sure that the corners are still in the nice position, and put my tape back in place. The tape isn't like, you know, there's some wiggle room. It holds things in place, but it also, you know, you do have a little space to kind of shimmy things around as necessary. So I can kind of, you know, when I go to put those walls together, I can kind of shimmy around a little bit to make sure that the glue and the corners are coming together the way I want them to. All right, checking all my corners. I can, you know, the tape gives you a little leeway so I can still, oops, see I pushed too hard over that edge, so put it back. And so you can kind of move it around a little bit if you need to, check all your corners, make sure everything got aligned correctly. Last, you know, sort of a last cleanup step is to go ahead and pull out a little piece of, you can get, you know, anything can be paper towel, it can be a cloth or whatnot, just clean that extra glue that might be sticking or seeped out from the edges off. That'll clean that all up. And if I wanted to, you know, if I wanted to go ahead and finish this off and if I wanted, you know, to make a perfect cube that was empty inside, you know, for whatever reason, then my last step, of course, would just be put glue around the top edge, right? And then adhere it. Or, you know, another way to think about it, though, of course, is you might want to use a better type of tape or a different mechanism, but you could also just go ahead and, you know, put a piece of tape on your lid and fold it over. And, you know, now you've got a hinged top, so maybe that's a container that you want to put things in for storage or whatnot. You know, a bunch of your pencils and erasers or whatnot that are on your table. All right, so that's it. That's going to be our 5" by 5" cube. Just all we needed was a ruler, an X-Acto knife, and some poster board and a pencil. So thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.